On October 26th, Council adopted a realignment plan that will have a significantly negative impact on the fire department's ability to protect the public, particularly in cases of fires, but also in many other emergency responses by the fire department every day. It is particularly concerning that this plan is put forward and adopted far too hastily, without a proper comprehensive risk assessment, and without adequate consultation with firefighters and the public. It is a further concern, factual errors and misleading statements made to Council during October 26 meeting have gone unchallenged. On November 4th, 2015, former Fire Marshal Patrick Burke provided Mayor and Council with an overview and commentary on the realignment of the fire process adopted by Council at the October 26th City Council meeting. Mr. Burke was contacted by Sault Ste. Marie professional firefighters because of his pertinent background and expertise, with just shy of 43 years of fire service experience. The city refused a request to have former Fire Marshal Burke appear before open council to discuss his concerns about the October 26th decision to cut frontline fire department resources by almost 25%. Mr. Burke became a Fire Marshal of Ontario on December 1st, 2006, and retired on November 30th, 2010. Since his retirement, Pat had been involved as an independent consultant on fire service matters and lives in Windsor, Ontario. His career in community safety spans more than 40 years. As a Fire Marshal for Ontario, Pat reported to the Deputy Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services through the Commissioner of Community Safety. The Fire Marshal in Ontario is responsible for providing advice to municipalities in the Ontario government on matters of fire safety in the province. Among other activities, this involved the development and distribution of public fire safety guidelines, technical guidelines, and reports related to the application of fire protection and prevention, the Fire Protection and Prevention Act 1997, and the Ontario Fire Code. At this point, I'd like to introduce you to Pat Burke.
Sault Ste. Marie firefighters sent me a copy of some comments the mayor made about me being a hired gun from out of town. Well, you know what? I'm not a hired gun. I've had the same position on staffing for as long as I've dealt with staffing issues or made suggestions about staffing. Provisions of the FPPA recognize that the fire protection needs and circumstances vary from municipality to municipality. For example, the fire protection delivery system would be significantly different in a small rural community as opposed to a larger urban center. The 10 in 10 guideline is not intended to be a uniform standard, but we recommend that it be used as a point of reference during the risk assessment and resource rationalization process to guide effective decision making and to demonstrate due diligence. It is a municipality's responsibility to determine the type and level of service required to fund that service and to ensure compliance with the FPPA. By going through a risk assessment and resource rationalization process, municipalities can objectively identify their current staffing capabilities and opportunities available to improve their emergency response capability, if any. It goes on to say, due to their inherent fire risks, large urban fire departments respond with firefighters and vehicles in greater numbers and in shorter time frames than the recommendations contained in the 10 in 10 guideline. If you don't do your job and people rely on you, you're setting yourself up for a fall. I was worried about fire chiefs being held liable. I was worried about council saying, well, you know what? The fire chief says it's okay, so we're relying on the fire chief. That responsibility belongs to council. And what the fire chief should be doing is explaining exactly what it takes to effectively and safely fight a fire in all of the risk types that you have in your community. If you can't do it, or you decide you're not going to do it, you have a responsibility to advise people, to tell them, you live in that high-rise building, we have no hope of rescuing you. No hope whatsoever if there's a fire in there, because we can't safely get into that building in a timely fashion. We don't have the resources to do it. You have to let people know. If you don't let people know, then the consequences will fall liability-wise on your shoulders. You have to be straight up with people. The 10 and 10 public fire safety guideline was rescinded, as I indicated. The NFPA standards are found in the building code of Canada, the building code of Ontario, the fire code of Ontario. NFPA standards are used internationally in codes. The standard they had for firefighter deployment for particular risks is very specific. It sets out the critical tasks at a single-family dwelling, 2,000 square feet, detached, no exposures, and no basement. And according to NFPA, it takes 14 or 15 if you engage an aerial operation at that fire. 14 or 15 firefighters on the scene. For all of the tasks that have to be done at a high-rise, NFPA says 42 to 43. Well, we have a suggestion here in Sault Ste. Marie. But don't worry about it, 13 people can handle a high-rise. You have to let the people know. People have a right to know what they can expect from their fire service and what their families can expect from their fire service. Two little things: comprehensive risk assessment, fire underwriter's survey. Those things should be done so that everybody has got the whole picture when they're making a decision. Council has the right to determine the level of service with one caveat. And that caveat is that it can be monitored by the fire marshal, and the fire marshal can make recommendations where that's not right. That's the only caveat. So they've got the right to do that. But I'm submitting to you that along with that right goes the responsibility to ensure that they've looked at everything before they make that decision that impacts upon you and all the taxpayers. I don't know of anybody that will tell you and say to you, any fire chief, any fire service person anywhere will say to you, in my expert opinion, all you need is 13 people to do that job. It seems that you don't send all of the people that you have on duty to a reported fire. It seems that there's a vehicle kept in reserve at times. What you've got to do is deal with the fire you got and send what you need. If you've got 16 people on duty now and you get a house fire, send 16 people. You may be one over if you have to use an aerial, maybe two over if you don't have to use the aerial. But you know what? It's better to be safe than it is to be sorry. It's not the council's fire service. It's not the fire chief's fire service. It's your fire service. Anybody who pays taxes in this city, it's your fire service. I encourage you to call your member of council. Tell them where you live at work, live or work. It's a high-rise, a low-rise, single family, wherever you work. You say, look, here's where I live. Do you have sufficient firefighters on duty to be able to come and perform firefighting operations and rescue operations and perform the critical tasks at my house if I have a fire, or at my residence if I have a fire, or at my business if I have a fire. Whatever they tell you, if it's yes or no, confirm it in writing.